Hello, everybody. This is Historian Stitch for our How To Wednesdays. Um, Basically, what we're doing today on the front porch, obviously, is going to end up being a two-part kind of spiel. Um, Basically, I wanted to go over how I create patterns, whether it's by using an actual pattern and then making it bigger, or just looking at a picture and creating it. Um, for ease and kind of segue into it, we're going to start with the pattern version first. My friend Naomi has asked me to make her a 1820s, 1830s-ish corset for the impression that she's putting together. And with that, I have been doing research for the past 2 months or so, waiting for the main material to come in, and it finally did yesterday. So I'm using a linen for the outside and then a cotton for the inside, because this particular corset is a rural corded corset from this varying time frame. Basically, what I am going for with this project is something akin to this. I found a book online that is nothing but corsets throughout all time frames, um, and am using it kind of as a guideline because it has lovely diagrams. This one, um, with grid pattern behind it so that I can actually use it to make a bigger version so that it'll actually fit. I want to make a mock-up out of some muslin that I have, and once the mock-up's made, that will essentially become the inside of the corset. But yeah, basically this is where I've started. This is basically what came from my research over the past couple months, along with finding that basically PDF version of a book online. I've also been using this lovely book. Got it fairly recently, but it does give some upsides and downsides to the corsets that they were wearing throughout the periods, and kind of melding these two together to create something hopefully wearable and useful and comfortable for her. So basically, like I said, the patterns that are in this one, which is basically what I'm making, have the grid behind it. So each box is about an inch long. With that, I drew it out first, using regular graph paper with the same concept as that version of the graph paper. Um, just draw out exactly what this one is in a smaller form, obviously. Um, and then my next step after drawing that out from the book version was adding Naomi's measurements into it, which essentially I took the main pattern and used what knowledge I have of what parts of a pattern need to be lengthened and shortened depending on who it's being made for, and applied it to the next drawing. In this case, everyone that I am friends with is very long-waisted and fairly wide at the shoulders, and at least compared to the original patterns, and it makes life interesting. So your three main spots that you need to watch out for, especially with corsets, I have found out, is the bust, your waistline, and your full hip line. I do a full hip measurement and a upper hip measurement. Your upper hip is right above your hip bone, and then your full hip is right at your hip bone. There's actually a good 2-3 inch difference there. So if you have a shirt or a skirt that needs to be sitting right at your hip bone or just above, you want your upper hip measurement, but you still need to account for that full hip measurement as well. So basically, I'm taking all of this and just progressively making it bigger. The nice thing about using the graph paper, you can make it so that each square equals 1 inch. So you can kind of see in the second part of this here, basically I put her measurements into it, made sure that I cut in half and divided where I needed to in those 3 main areas, and then expanded it slightly. From this, I will then go to using something I had never been able to find up until recently, thanks to Amazon. Basically, it is interfacing with graphing lines on it. It doesn't actually iron down to your material, which is kind of nice, because then it doesn't stick to everything it ever touches. But it is material. It behaves like material. You can sew it. You can make a mock-up out of it if you really want to. But each square is an inch. So from this very small version of drawing, I can then make the bigger version out of this with the exact measurements I've already drawn out and go from there. This is basically what I do with most of my patterns if I am making one on my own, especially going from book version or 8x11 version to a full pattern. Once I've got this figured out, I will probably, for her sake, do a paper version that I can send with the corset once it's done. That way she has something that she can make again later and adjust and fix if she so chooses to. But yeah, that's basically how I typically do this part. When I did my own corset, which I'm wearing today, I ended up making 4 or 5 different versions of just the drawing part, put it to paper, taped it together to see how it would look, and it didn't look like it was going to fit a small doll. So I upsized it a few more times until I finally got to the stage that I was happy with and made the mock-up. The other variation of this is, this isn't going to be a two-part, just going off of pictures. It is, in my family at least, it is a skill that seems to skip generations. My, I believe, possibly great aunt, probably a few more greats added to that, but ancestor of from somewhere in my mother's side of the family, could look at a picture, just cut it out, and it would be what she wanted it to be. Skipped a good 2-3 generations, and I can do it now instead. Which kind of aggravates mom just a little bit, but it's fine. So the other version of this is I am making a 40s, 50s inspired sundress out of this material, which I'm not sure how old actually is. Came from the antique store, but it also came from a section that didn't have that many antiques in it. Is what it is. Either way, it's a nice sheer material. I'm going to have to put something under it for the bodice, which is what this particular chunk will be. But when it comes to looking at a picture and creating a garment from it, you need to look for shapes, especially familiar shapes. So if it's, I tend to stick with Civil War time period to basically modern day. With 19th century women's clothing, you have princess scenes. which are basically, if you look at the back of a dress, you will see kind of a curve to it, such as that. And those side pieces are going to be almost teardrop shaped with a flat line at the bottom. Whereas the main body piece that is this side of the curve is more triangular, especially when you get to the shoulders, because you're going to have the kind of cut here for your arm, but it's not going to be entirely triangular. If you make it too triangular, you're not going to have armholes to put your sleeves into. So that's one variation of shapes that you need to look for. Another version is squares. If all else fails and you can't get the very specific shapes that you want for, or need rather, for what you're creating from a picture, you can basically square it up. Cut out squares instead of actually shaping it, except for at the neck and the arms. You can curve those inwards just a little bit so that you have somewhere to actually move and put your head. But that squaring up is actually really helpful because, especially if you start with a mock-up and go from there, you can then put darts in it, which are basically taking a material and stitching at an angle. So in this case, if I wanted one right here, I would go from probably an inch down to where my finger is on this side. That would be your dart. That is what makes your clothing fit a little bit better. Darts go in not only women's clothing, but also men's as well, to many people's surprise usually. You also can do just straight darts rather than the triangular ones like I just showed. The only problem with squared ones is you then have to kind of tack it down so that it doesn't come apart, and so that nothing ends up in that dart. Otherwise, it will be in with you for all eternity. Um, but yeah, that's basically, you always want to start with a mock-up. Do not do what I do and just cut the material and go from there. Though I seem to have fairly good luck with that, I do not suggest it. I've gotten yelled at many times for just going and cutting lightweight wools that shouldn't be yet and turning it into a dress and praying to the gods that it actually fits correctly. Not suggested. But yeah, not much of a how-to really today, but in a way it kind of is. And if you guys have any questions, please ask. This is a topic I get asked a lot, especially out at events. Because of course we'll be asked, "Did you make that?" I'm like, yes, I did, but without a pattern. And that tends to lead to further conversations. One thing to note, the further back in time you get, unless you're using like McCall's patterns or period impression patterns, or something to that extent, the easiest way to get a truly period garment created is to go to the period patterns themselves. The only problem with that is they are in book form, and you have to be able to draw it out and then expand it so that it fits you properly. There are many really good books covering that topic. I will try and put them below. I have a few of them here at home. But yeah, that's basically it. Not entirely sure what we will be doing next time. It might be the actual creation of the mock-up for this corset. This might just be an ongoing series of starting with the pattern and going from there. We will see. But yeah, if anybody has any questions, please put them in the comments below. And yeah, I will see you all next time.